Scrappy Creations, where we sew the scraps of your life into beautiful creations. This week I have a miniature project for you. A while back we made some composition notebook covers, and these were very popular. Thank you guys so much for all the views. The link will be below if you missed it. These were popular, and so you can use a lot of scrap fabrics with those, but what about a mini composition notebook cover? Wouldn't that be cute? Smaller scraps. Great gift for kids or for in your purse or tote bag. Take to work, keep in the car, any number of things. These are adorable. They work up so quickly. They only take, let me see, 5 pieces of fabric. They're all scrap. The largest one is just about 5 by 7. So that with some snaps. Of course, you could use some Velcro if you wanted to, but I'm not going to stand here very long telling you about how cute these are because these are so quick to make. I think we ought to just get right at it. Buckle up. This is fun. Grab your scraps and meet me over at the sewing table because here we go. All right, let's take a look at what we're going to need to make this. Now, I have a lot of small pieces of fabric sitting around, so some of these were perfect for this. And I'm sure you have some too. You could also piece your fabrics together if you wanted to. Okay, for your first cut, you're going to need 2. Now, this is for your outer and this is your lining. So you could use something like muslin or something that doesn't really matter, but if you have a piece that matches, that's fine too. They both measure 5 1/8 by 7 1/4. Now I will list all the measurements below in the description box, but again, that's 5 1/8 by 7 1/4. One for the outer, one for the lining. Then you're going to need 2 pieces for your pockets. On my first one, goodness, the snap is still new. I didn't even use matching pieces. This is a scrap project, so feel free to use whatever you have on hand. Now for this one, I just had some gray fabric that I used in there. And it doesn't have to match perfectly to be perfect. These things are adorable. So it's a good way to use up small pieces. So both of these measure 5 1/8 by 4 1/2. So these are your pocket pieces. You need 2. And again, they don't even have to match. Then you're going to need a 2 1/2 by 2 1/2 inch square. And that's for your tab, okay? That's for your tab. Now, I put interfacing in mine. I made the first one without it, and I'm sorry, these snaps are new, so they're tight. Anyway, this one has interfacing, so it's a lot better to grip onto. So I'm going to teach this using the interfacing, but please don't feel like you have to. I'll leave that up to you. I used one piece that was 3/4 inch by 1 1/2, and this one is 1 inch by 1 1/2. So 3/4 by 1 1/2 and 1 by 1 1/2. And this is Pellon 987. I just grabbed in my scrap bag and found the lightest weight interfacing that I could find. Now you're going to need cam snaps. I guess possibly you could use Velcro. There again, totally up to you. I'm using the cam snaps. There's a male and a female. And I have the tool for it. I'll leave a link down below in the description box as to where I found this set. I've been using out of these for easily 3 years, and I still have a bunch of them left from my original purchase. Okay, you're going to need a mini composition book. I found these at my local Walmart in a 3-pack. They measure 3¼ by 4½, and I paid $1.12 for the 3 of them. I do know that my local Dollar Tree has them for $1.25 for a package of 3. I think you can find them at most big box stores or probably a lot of places. So other than that, you know, you're going to need whatever you use to cut these out. I used a turning tool. I used my ruler, my pins, and an iron. Now this is not a long project, but it's so fun. And you know, these could be made to give out at kids' birthday parties. They could be used for so many different things. One thing I did want to say before we get started is when you cut out your outer fabric, the one that's going to show, if you're able to, if you have a big enough scrap piece, just be mindful of what's going to be on the center. Now my Spider-Man isn't perfectly centered, but I only had about 1.5 inches to work with to the other side. So that's about as centered as I could make him. And I was also thinking that I could take some selvage edges on something and applique them on there. It'd be a good place to use some lace or rickrack or buttons, what have you. We all have these things around our sewing space, and it's a perfect use for them. Okay, so let's get at this because we're going to make this in no time flat. Okay, here we're going to get started. Now, these are a rectangle, but just be mindful that the 5 1/8, okay, just double check that you have the 5 1/8 going that way, and that's the way you're folding this in half, okay? You don't want to fold your 4½ inch part because that would not work out well, okay? These are our pockets. And if you want to, you could put a little bit of starch or sizing on this. You could probably put a little bit of interfacing. The problem with using too much interfacing in a project like this versus, I don't know if you've seen my composition notebook cover tutorial where we did the full-size ones like this. The problem with using the interfacing in the smaller ones is we have a smaller space to turn them right side out. So I stayed away from it as much as possible, although, as I said, I had to come up with the small ones because the snaps really needed it, I felt. Okay, so both of those are folded in half. So this was the 5 1/8 inch. So you folded in half the 4½ inch part, okay? Now we're going to go on to our tab. This is going to be our snap tab. So I want you to fold it in half. Now this is 2½ inches square. You don't even have to worry about it. And you don't even really have to press it. I only do to hold it together while I sew it because we're gonna come back and press that in a different direction. So right now, take this over to the sewing machine and just along here, I want you to back tack and sew along and back tack using a small stitch length, like a 1.8 or a 2.0, okay? Now we're going to be flipping this right side out, so if you don't back tack well, it will come undone, okay? So just that line, and then I'll show you what to do next. All right, now I have sewn just along that top using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I'm kind of nervous about that iron. I'm going to leave that there. We're going to open this up. Really, I am. Okay. Because it's a tube, okay? You have your seam allowance. And we're going to flatten that open like that. I want to let you see what I'm doing. You see, I flattened that along the center, okay? So give that a good press. You want that to stay in place. We don't need that moving. I'm going to shut that iron off. Okay. Now we're going to go back over to the sewing machine, and using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, we're going to back tack, sew across, and back tack just on one end of this, okay? Just on this end. Okay, so that's how it should look. Your middle seam is flattened, then you have a line of stitching going across the top. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to trim kind of in a triangular shape to get that close to the edges. Now, this part can be a little fiddly, but you're going to flip this right side out. Now, I found it was easier for me to grab it with tweezers. Of course, I was sitting down and not leaning against or leaning around a tripod with a camera on it. So it was probably a little bit easier. Let me see if I can do it in this angle. Okay, now we're going to press it one more time to get it nice and flat. All right, now here again, this part might be a little fiddly, but I found, like I said, that when I had interfacing in this snap tab, it really did help the project. So what I kind of did was I just finagled it until I got it. I took some tweezers and pushed it in there. And of course, it's got fusible on one side, so it doesn't really matter which side goes where. You just want to make sure that when it gets in there that it's not folded up in there, and you can feel it. Because that's what I did, is I could feel whether it was folded. And then you're going to take your iron and let the glue that's on that interfacing do its work. Just make sure it has the heat that it needs. Then we're going to set this aside to cool while we put the little notebook cover together. And you're going to be so amazed at how quickly this goes together. Okay. Put my tools away. We'll set this aside. We have our pocket pieces here. All right. So the other thing that we need to deal with is our other interfacing piece. Now, I don't get really particular about this. Now, this is the front, okay? Right here is going to be our front cover. So I want this interfacing to be right in here, okay? So I'm going to put it so that it's about middle way. You can measure it if you want, 2.5 inches. I put it about 1/2 inch in. So I'm going to press that. And here I thought I was done with the iron. Of course I wasn't done with the iron. How silly of me. And while we have the iron out, let's find the center of this side over here. because over here, now that we have that center, you're going to take so that your line of sewing is up, okay, not down. You want it up. And we're going to center this. Now, I let this edge go off by about 1/8 of an inch, okay? But just where you made that fold line, just center that right there. Keeping that nice and straight, you're going to pin it in place, okay? Now, I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and I'm going to baste this. So for anyone new, that just means to take a kind of a bigger stitch and go very close to your edge. You don't want it to be like a 1/4 inch in. You need it to be about 1/8 or 1/16 of an inch from this edge, okay? So you're just holding this in place, okay? Okay, so that is stitched in place. That's what it looks like on the back. It doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be stitched. Okay, so right side is up. Tab is over here. Your little piece of interfacing is over here. Don't worry about it being even. It just needs to hold one of those snaps. Okay, take one of your pocket pieces. Make sure that your opening is towards the edge, okay? You want your opening towards the edge. Place that. Again, the opening, if I can find it here, towards the edge, matching up your corners, your edges. You want everything even, okay? Now this is our lining piece. We're going to flip it right side down, okay? So you should have the wrong side peeking at you. Let's give this a few pins in the corners first. All right. Now, if your fabric is directional like mine, well, I want to make sure that my opening is at the bottom, okay? Right down here is where I want it. So I can see where these pocket pieces are. I'm going to pin going the opposite way, just inside that pocket edge. I can feel where that is, and I'm marking that with my pins. Then I'm going to hold this in a few more places. I like to pin things well. I'm actually going to hold that pocket down a little bit. Right, now we're going to take this over to the sewing machine and we're going to start at this pin, which again is just inside that pocket area. We're going to back tack. I do it twice, okay? I go forward, back, go around using a strict 1/4 inch seam allowance until you get back to here and back tack well. I use a 2mm stitch length on this. I like it nice and tight. So let's go sew that around there and I'll meet you right back here. Right, I've sewn around and I have my opening right here. We're going to trim our corners and I want to trim fairly close. And I kind of round in there a little bit. I probably shouldn't make a mess on my ironing board though, huh? And if you somehow nick your seam allowance, just go back over to the sewing machine and stitch that up. Look at that. Nobody would even know. You guys wouldn't tell even if you did. Okay. We're going to flip this right side out and we're going to need our iron next. And our point turner. Or something to poke your corners out with. And when you first turn it out, your pockets might be going the wrong way or something, but it just takes a moment to fix everything. All right, let's use our turning tool and carefully poke your corners. You don't want to give too much poke, or you might put your turning tool right out through there. And this is going to need a nice press. You want to make sure at the bottom that everything is 1/4 of an inch so that it's nice and straight. Right there. If you have steam, it's a good time to use it. Make sure everything's where it should be. It isn't absolutely necessary. These are pretty forgiving little projects, I'll tell you. And they're really quick. You cut out a bunch, you could sew up a lot in one day. Okay, so now we have our opening. I'm going to use pins just, whoops, to mark it and show you. It's just between my pocket pieces. Now, I'm going to put a pin right here just to kind of hold it. I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine, and when I say I'm going to sew close, I'm going to sew very close to that edge. Just use the coordinating fabric so that it doesn't stick out too much. You could hand stitch it, but really, I didn't even notice them when I did it on this one. I mean, really, you would have to really look to find that. Okay, so I'm going to take that over to the sewing machine and sew very closely on that opening, and I'll be right back. Okay, that part is done. Now we just move on to our snaps. Okay, I'll show you how it fits. Nicely. Okay, so we just need our snap. Now I have a very small cutting mat. You don't need to have one. It's not necessary. You can do it without this. I just found it to be helpful for this. Okay, so the one thing I'm going to show you that I learned was on my first one, I had the snap very close to this edge. Now when I go to grab it, it's harder to grab. Okay. So I went in just a little bit. The edge is about 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch from that edge. And I found that to be a little easier, but you do whatever you're comfortable with as far as that goes. Okay, so I have this tool and this tool. So what I did was I kind of placed it like that. Found my center. Put that in there and make sure that's where I want it. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay. So I'll make sure that I can see that. Because over here, we don't want to go all the way through this flap, this pocket, okay? It needs to just stay on this one here. Okay. So I'm going to close this as if it had the notebook in it. like that. And I'll make my mark. I think I can see it. I'll make sure I know where it is here. Okay. So, we'll take this one first, and with the right side up, you're going to use one of your flat pokey pieces. I don't know what else to call it. The one you have two of the exact same one. This is always the hardest part for me, is getting that to poke through there. Okay, and then you're going to put your male part on this one. I probably should show you that. There's a male and a female part. You got your female and your male. All right, grab your tool. Yeah. Okay, so this black piece, you're going to go underneath there and let that set right on there, and then push that right straight down. And that's clamped right on there. Okay, now we're going to come around to the front. Widen out that opening a little bit so that I can see it. Now this one, this piece, has to come up through. This will be easier for you because you don't have the tripod. Oh, I need to make the hole again because I've lost it. I think I need another light. There, I can see it this time. There. Okay, I'm going to set that female part on there. One good press. Okay. And let's put this little notebook cover together. Now, when you put this in here, if it fetches up on that, that's okay. Just get it closer to the top and not the bottom piece. Or get it closer to the pocket, I guess is what I'm saying. These fit really well. I mean, they are perfect. And isn't that adorable, you guys? Seriously. And it's just scraps. It's just scraps. I think it would be adorable if you had some leftover, if you crumb pieced. I just think it would be so interesting done. But of course, you can use up all these small pieces that you have laying around. Now, if you liked today's project or you enjoyed hanging out with me, I would invite you to subscribe to Marie's Scrappy Creations, and that way you get notifications when I put out a new tutorial, which is usually every other Sunday. Now, I had a lot of fun making these. I hope that you give these a try. I think you're going to get addicted to them. Now, earlier I showed you the larger composition notebook covers that I made a while back. I'm going to leave a link below to that tutorial in case you missed it. And thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you like this. I hope you make your own. And remember, be kind out there. The world needs more of that. See you next time, right here.